Welcome back to Professional Perspectives. I'm Marvakella, joined as always by my co-host Praneeth Vimuri. Every day we walk into buildings without giving much thought to the engineering, planning, and safety standards that make those spaces secure. Yet behind nearly every home, school, hospital, and skyscraper is a network of professionals dedicated to protecting lives through building safety and innovation. Today's guest leads one of the world's most influential organizations in that mission.
Joining us today is John Belcik, Chief Executive Officer of the International Code Council. Before becoming a CEO in 2025, John served as the organization's Chief Operating Officer and Chief Financial Officer, helping shape its financial strategy and long-term growth. His career spans leadership positions with Wilson Sporting Goods, the Illinois Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority, and academia as an adjunct professor at DePaul University. Today, he leads an organization whose motto, building codes and standards, help create safer, more resilient communities in over 100 countries.
What stood out while learning about Mr. Belcik's journey is that his leadership isn't about numbers or operations, it's built rather on integrity, empathy, persistence, and service. Whether mentoring future leaders, improving organizations, or helping shape the standards that protect billions of people, his focus has always been on doing the things the right way. So for episode 29, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to Professional Perspectives.
Rob and Praneeth, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm really looking forward to our discussion tonight, and so thank you very much for having me and asking me to come over tonight.
Yeah, thank you. And just to kick off our conversation then, growing up, what's first sparked your interest in business and finance?
I as a high schooler, which was a long time ago for me, but I ended up in an accounting class when I was a junior in high school. I took one, and you had a couple of electives to take, and so I picked accounting, and it turned out I was actually pretty good at it. And so I took a junior year course in high school and enjoyed it. And then I thought, there's another course, an advanced course in my senior year of high school, and I took that one. And again, did well both academically and did enjoy it. I liked the thought process, some of the math, and it was a very logical sort of progression of how you do things in accounting in many ways. You didn't get to the creative part till later in your life, but anyway, so I had an aptitude for it when I was in high school, and then went to the college and began. I felt like I had an advantage going into college because I had a couple of years of accounting class already, and so when I started college, I was ahead of many of the students who had never had set foot in an accounting class before. So I understood, some of the mechanics of accounting long before my college career started. So that helped me a lot. Actually, gave me a boost.
Yeah, that's great to hear, especially to see how like your accounting class in high school kind of inspired you. Because
Mhm.
even for us, our main audience is high schoolers, and for them, classes they take often are the things that they find passionate, and then they later seem to pursue in either major or job. So that's really cool to hear from your end too. And then regarding your university, so you attended really prestigious universities, both DePaul University and the University of Notre Dame. How did these experiences shape your life, and do you feel like you were able to benefit through a network that you made out of these universities?
But at DePaul, I had an older brother and older sister, and both of them had gone there, but never finished. And so I was the first one to finish in college in my family. And I'd gone to DePaul, one, because it was a school that was in Chicago. I lived in Chicago. And, at that time, my family didn't have a lot of money. Never did. But so it was a school I could afford to go to. I paid for it. And so I decided to go to DePaul. They had a very good business school and accounting program. And so I went to, they had a campus in downtown Chicago. So I went right down into what we call a loop, which is the business district in Chicago. And then I had gotten a job. So in the afternoons, I would go to school in the mornings, and then in the afternoons, I'd walk down the street a few blocks, and I went to work at the Board of Trade, the Chicago Board of Trade. And so I worked as a clerk in upstairs in one of the offices, buying and selling grain, and it was really a great experience to do that, and you got to see a whole different group of people. But that's how I paid for college, and so it was it was really somewhat a practical matter of something that I could afford to do. I was home. I was able to stay home and work, and that really helped me a lot get through college and be able to finish.
Yeah, and did this kind of experience of having to sustain yourself in these college environments, did that help shape your career, would you say?
Yeah, you know what? It's as I still joke today. It's really, if you're in Chicago, we all network, but it is really, you run across so many people who went to DePaul and have a background, or meet there. We call them Blue Demons. That was the mascot. So you meet so many people from Chicago, and actually one of my old bosses at Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority was a DePaul grad as well. And so it always, there's a lot of people, like I said, in Chicago who have that affiliation or know somebody who went there, and so it really does. It creates a little bit of affinity. And Notre Dame, when I went there first, it was if you grew up, I grew up in the South Side of Chicago, so it was a place where you either, and it's a heavily Roman Catholic area, and so in Notre Dame and DePaul are both Catholic schools, and so it was Notre Dame. Didn't really, I didn't have the grades when I was coming out of high school, and and my family didn't have the money, so Notre Dame wasn't really a good option for me, but later on in life, it's something I always wanted to do. And so when I had the opportunity, I got to a point in my life where if I didn't do it now, I was never going to do it. And at that point in time, we were just going to have our fifth child. And so, it was a tough couple of years. I went through accelerated program at Notre Dame, but got to go to all the football games and enjoy all the football weekends in South Bend, and it was really a great experience. I'm so happy I did it. And later on, when leaving Notre Dame, I had a great group of guys and people that I was in school with. Still stay in touch with some of them, and I think I'm convinced that there was several. It opened up several doors for me later on, particularly at International Code Council, because my boss was, I think he was an aspiring Notre Dame Domer as well. He never went, but I think that's one of the things that caught his eye on my resume. So, it tells you just, you never know what'll get somebody in, or what opens a door for you. But I owe a lot to my background with Notre Dame, and I'm just really so happy I did that. And going to DePaul too. It's just a great part of my life. And actually, when I did adjunct professor, I went back to DePaul, and they were happy to have me. And my first meeting I was in was with one of my old accounting teachers there, and so it's kind of funny to be, now I'm one of his peers effectively. I was an adjunct professor later in life, and before I was one of his students. So it was a really interesting meeting for me to experience that.
Yeah, no, that's actually great to hear, especially the fact that you were now a peer with one of your old professors. And I feel like very few people get to experience that. And that's actually a really cool story you have to tell. Um, so, like, moving a bit away from your
Mhm.
education now and into your work experience, uh, so looking back, is there like a defining moment that set the direction for like what career path you wanted to do, or do you just like go with the flow?
It's an interesting question. I like that one. I think that my philosophy over looking back, careers are something that you build, take over time. And I started coming out of DePaul. I went to a public accounting firm and worked there for one of the biggest accounting firms at that time, one of the biggest firms in the country, and in Chicago it was the biggest. And then I learned, you learn certain takeaways from one. And then I met somebody, a guy I worked with or worked for, he as an auditor I was at Arthur Anderson. And when I left there, he had left already and was working at Wilson Sporting Goods. And so, one, I gained some background in Securities and Exchange Commission reporting, which helped at Arthur Anderson, which got me, a resume and interview at Wilson, because they were looking for somebody who knew public reporting. And this particular person remembered me a little bit and thought, I don't remember anything bad about him, so let's at least interview him. And so I got into that role at Wilson, and then that helped me to learn a lot more things and started moving me towards an operational. I started in finance, but my portfolio of things I was responsible for broadened me out. And I had operations, and I've been responsible for golf ball factories and tennis ball factories and customer service and a lot of other things that typically isn't an accountant's role. But I was given the opportunities, and I did the most I could with them. And so that really helped me learn more about operations, which prepared me for Metropolitan Pier and Exposition Authority, where I took on the CFO role. Was my first step up from I was the ranking finance person, VP of finance at Wilson, but then I took the next step up and into a CFO role at Metropolitan Pier, where I had responsibility not only for finance and I learned a lot about public finance, and but all which is a whole different animal because it's a unit of government. So the finance and the accounting is a little bit different. Debits are still on the left, credits are still on the right, but a lot of other things are different. And you also have you Wilson was a private entity, but Metropolitan Pier was really a unit of government, and so you had a lot of politics involved in there. There was political appointments that people were in the board of directors that had appointed by the governor or the mayor of the city of Chicago, and so I got a chance to deal with a lot of them. And they were a tough board. They were a tough group of people to work for. So I learned a lot. It was really hard sometimes, but I learned a lot about how to deal with a board of directors. And I also learned that as Wilson was a for-profit, but the unit, basically a unit of government, its real job, its real mission was to be an economic engine for the city of Chicago, because it was Metropolitan Pier and Exposition. I should explain is, if no one's ever heard of that, most people haven't, but it's McCormick Place, which is the big convention center in Chicago, and Navy Pier, which is the largest tourist attraction in the Midwest. And so it was really an economic engine for the city of Chicago to bring people in from outside to come to conventions, to go have, fly in, have dinner, taxi cabs, all the hotel people who work at the hotels, all those people are kept employed by these folks coming in and being tourists and visiting. So our real mission was not to make money, but was really to be the economic engine for the city of Chicago. And so all the families who came to Navy Pier and all those things were all creating jobs for people who worked in the city, and then their jobs paid for other people. And it's sort of an economic web of how things work in the city, and that was our true mission. And so when I left Metropolitan Pier to go to ICC, again, my Notre Dame connection maybe got me a job, maybe at least got me an interview, but I had learned how to work with the board of directors. And my board of directors at Metropolitan Pier was a lot harder than ICC's board, so I was very well trained and prepared. And then I took on a finance role, and I had more operational. I had some operational experience. I took on initial role as finance, but I had the IT, the human resources, those sorts of folks. But then in about 2012, I had the opportunity to not only be the chief financial officer, but also the chief operating officer for the organization, and which expanded a lot of a lot of my role expanded significantly at that point in time. But all the work I had spent and done at Wilson running, operational efforts, and then also at Metropolitan Pier, all helped me to understand how to deal with a board, how the operations of the organization worked. And then ICC is a very mission driven, it's a membership association. So we have members across the country, about 70,000 members across the country who serve in various capacities, most of them working for government building departments. So when you hear somebody needs a building permit, or there's an inspector coming out to do a building inspection, those are our members. And so they come out and they're public servants. They're generally employed by their jurisdictions. And so but we provide them with the tools and the support, and we write the building codes that most buildings in the country are built to. And so our mission is really safety, keeping people safe at the places they work, the places they live, the places they play, and the places they go to school. And it's everybody in the country. We touch everyone's life every single day in the United States with our codes. And so it's a really meaningful, relevant organization. And so as you can't tell, I really enjoy my job, and I'm very lucky to have it.
Yeah, I can most definitely hear the passion in your career and how passionate you are to keep all these people safe and infrastructure. And I think it's honestly really inspiring and a really good idea that careers aren't something that are just like separate entities, that they all build on top of each other. And I really like how you phrased how your whole career path into a one whole cohesive experience. Kind of touching on that experience though, early in your career, you did have an opportunity to work for the FBI, but you chose a different path. What kind of like went into that decision of choosing a different path?
You know what? It's that's a really cool question. I like that one too. Um, I have a brother who was a Chicago policeman, and so and he was already a Chicago policeman. Um, and I interviewed I was sort of looking around for a job leaving Arthur Anderson, and I had Wilson. I had this opportunity at Wilson. And I also took an interview at the FBI, and I passed. And they asked me to come back for a second, and they do a background search, a very significant background searches, as you might understand, might guess. They really are very picky about people, and they don't want people with a bad background. But with my brother working for the police force, I knew how much that really upset my. I'm telling you, really the inside story, but I knew how much that upset my mom my mother, because she worried every day when my brother went out on his shift for the police force, and I really felt like doing that to my mom again and making her have two officers, law officers in the family, putting themselves on the front lines, being a first responder, was something that I didn't want to do that to her. And I did really enjoy my accounting in the background I had, and accounting is one of the professions that is attractive to the FBI as well, because you have a lot of white collar crime and those sorts of things, and understanding accounting is something that the FBI found very useful. So I had the opportunity, but I decided to go a different path to maybe give my mom a break. But at the end of the day, it does pay better being on this side of the desk as opposed to the FBI. It turns out. So
Yeah, well, thank you to your family members for their service, and it's also so cool to hear that you turned down the FBI, because many people have that as their dream job, and you were able to turn them down. So that's really cool, and like you said, this side of the desk might have more money, and it's really cool to see the decision you made, and it also kind of shows that there's multiple sides, and you kind of shouldn't like always sacrifice your dream job for maybe getting more money and giving yourself more
right,
stability. Right. So, for the next question, many like people's guiding values are like empathy, integrity, persistence, and patience. How do these sort of values shape your decisions, and how do they shape like your work style?
uh, you know what I think, especially at ICC, it's it's a very mission driven organization, and every organization has a certain culture about it and how they work, how they like to work together. Some are very much, uh, I call them table pounders, people who, the organization just built on people yelling and having, a very, uh, you know, they're yellers. I don't know how to say it, but people are, there's organizations that do that. Their confrontation is a part of what they do, and they don't mind that. It's just, if you fit in that culture and you enjoy that culture, it's great. That's not who I am, and so I found the culture at ICC to be very much dedication to mission. We are an organization who is based on service and serving the public, serving our members. Again, and that's a very much something that I like doing. I have a very service oriented mentality. Um, I have a level of, because of my background, I guess I would say I'm a humble person generally, and so it helps me to stay grounded, but I also make sure that I have the right people around me, and so we built a team. One of the people that worked for me at Metropolitan Pier, I brought her over with me from Metropolitan Pier to ICC. She's been with me for 16 or 17 years now. But this one person I've really kind of helped to mentor and brought her along. And she's now the CFO. She took my job over. So it's an organization where we have a lot of, we're very oriented towards people, and we take care of our own employees. Again, culturally, because we're not for profit, we don't always pay top dollar for people. We don't have stock. No one owns us. So it is an organization that you have to have a sort of a higher ideal or higher values than just plain money to come into work there. It's really, you see people come and they stay because of the mission, because what we do is important, and that's really what holds the organization together. And being a person who approaches things humbly, has a level of, like you said, empathy, and I think a good, I think pretty good people skills most of the time. I think that's the type of organization that I thrive in and do my best work.
I see. And like honestly, I definitely agree with you on the approach to it, as like, building safety isn't always something that people think of until
Mhm.
something does go wrong. Kind of touching on that part actually. Why do you think, or like, should students and like the general public care about building codes? And if so, like how come?
It's Praneeth. I think it goes back around to um, building codes are, as you said, most people don't know, and they take them for granted. And but it keeps everyone in the United States safe, because there's fire codes that dictate how determine safety levels within homes and commercial buildings. And a lot of those things that the building codes, how they evolved over years and years and years, are things like the San Francisco earthquake in 1906, and there was a Iroquois fire, a theater fire in Chicago in the early 1900s, the Great Chicago Fire in 1871. All of those disasters started to bring forward a need for building codes, because there was a lot of lives lost, there was a lot of property damage and loss, and so all of those things start to bring, the reasons why you have panic bars or doors that push bars on doors that lead outside in commercial buildings. That's a building code item. And they have to open out, so they don't open in, because in the Iroquois fire, the doors in the theater opened in. Well, people were trying to get out, and the doors opened in. That was a problem. And so there was learnings from that. Just like anytime you have a disaster, it's unfortunate, but we learn from those things, and so that we can put those if he's lost a life, it's a shame, it's a terrible shame, but if you learn something from it, at least there's a benefit to people going forward, and that's what we try to do. So learning and applying the building codes in the built environment has become something that, we write what we call a model code. So it's basically the minimum standard for safe construction, and then states and local jurisdictions, cities, states, whatever it might be, it depends on the state and the laws and how they go about it. But California, for example, then publishes a California statewide code, and so they'll take things and they'll amend the codes for earthquake provisions. You guys have a lot more earthquakes than Chicago does. And so the structural provisions in the code, in the California code, or wildfires, are all a little bit more beefy, or a little bit more stringent than they are in the base model code, because our code is applied across the United States and then changed for the particular areas. In the South, you have hurricanes. In Chicago, where I live, we have snow loads on roofs, which you guys in Arizona or California don't worry about too much. So we set the model, and then the states geographically can modify that model to meet the needs for their particular citizens. So it's a system that works very well and allows the codes to be relevant to everyone, because it can be adjusted, customized a little bit for each particular instance around the country.
Yeah, and kind of like what you were talking about earlier too, is that many people aren't too aware about like the codes and like the important aspect they play in our lives. And even me, I feel like I am pretty not that knowledgeable in the area. And then one perspective I didn't look at it was the way you talked about like past earthquakes, like the Chicago fire or like the California earthquake in the Bay. For things like that, you said that the whole community was able to evolve and kind of instill a sense of practicing codes like this. Do you think these codes, in the grand scheme of things, were able to help reduce incidents and were able to create like a safer country and a safer environment, in the sense that there were less fatalities and less incidents?
Oh yes, absolutely. That is absolutely the goal. And there have been studies done that show, for every dollar that people spend on, and this is a government study that was done, but every dollar spent on building codes and resilience saves $11 in a disaster. So for every $1 you spend, you returns you $11, because because the building stood up in the hurricane or whatever. Whereas all the other, if you take, there are instances where I've seen photos and where a hurricane, particularly say Florida, where they have very good, strong building codes, but when the hurricane comes through, those codes that are written, or when buildings are built to a very current building codes, those buildings survive hurricanes now. Whereas the house next door, which might have been built 50 years ago, wiped out. And you saw that in some of the fires, the horrible fires in the LA, the Palisades fires, where there were certain homes that were built to relatively new codes and had wild provisions for fire provisions or fire safety recommendations that were they're factored into their construction versus homes that, again, were many of those homes in the Palisades in that area were built to much earlier building codes, or building codes at all, probably in some cases. And those houses, unfortunately, were largely lost. But the houses that were built to current codes do much better in terms of surviving disasters now. So yes, we save people's lives. We touch everyone's life, and we save a lot of lives every single year.
Yeah, I think that's really important actually to recognize how the priorities are changing, especially with like more focus on climate resilience. And I like how Code Council is adapting to these challenges. Another change that is happening though rapidly across the world is technology and innovations with AI and smart
Mhm.
buildings. So, how do these kind of affect the modern building codes that you guys are implementing?
We're exploring a lot of different things when it comes to AI, and there's things that you can do internally for process purposes inside the organization to help speed up and or just not eliminate jobs, because that's not our goal and that's not what we're going to do, but to be able to make our own staff more efficient and utilizing AI. And we're just kind of starting on that journey now. We've done some things. We really did do it. The team that works on some of our products has done a really good job of introducing AI into some of the products that we have on the market now. They're called digital codes. And so a person, codes can be a complicated thing. Each one of those books, or many of those books, are 1,000 pages in terms of size. And so interpreting and understanding all of those, the codes and the provisions in there, can be difficult at times. And so we've got AI applications where you can ask it a question, and we've trained our model so on the codes, on some state codes, and also our model code. And so the AI can actually answer questions, and it's got a very 90+% accuracy rate. We continue to train it and get it better on a consistent basis. So we've really found AI being a very useful tool to help our members and other people who just want to ask a question about the codes and how you might want to build a deck on your back of your house or whatever it might be. Those questions can be, you can get some answers in terms of what the code provisions say on that particular topic.
Yeah, it's great to see that you guys have been able to adapt and evolve to this changing tech innovations and the growth of AI. And it's great to see that you guys are able to harness the benefits of it. And that's really inspiring to hear. And as we get close to wrapping up, I just wanted to say that outside of work, you're an avid runner who completed the Chicago Marathon with a personal best in 2024. So, congratulations for that.
Thank you.
Uh, what has endurance sports taught you about leadership, if any?
You know what? It's I think it's taught me a lot about discipline, and I'm also a pretty disciplined person. And I think, for just to use the race as an example, the race isn't, you don't get up one morning and decide you're going to run a marathon. It's a process that you go through, much like a career, I guess, in some ways, but it's a process you go through to build. And you build up your miles, and you run, for an average race, I'll probably run 18 weeks in advance of the race. I start training, and I run, I think, about 700 miles or so in that period of time. And on this old body, that's kind of hard sometimes, but I manage through it and get through it. And so it just teaches you the need, or the requirement to continue to persevere, to overcome the obstacles. When something hurts, you figure it out, you manage it through a race. But it's the discipline and the ability to, the sense of accomplishment. I'm a pretty competitive guy, and so it's just another place where that shows up. And so it's an area, like I said, that the discipline, it also helps me from the perspective of being able to get out, because it's I used to play a lot of team sports, but as I got a little older, running got to be something I really enjoyed doing. And so it allows me to clear my mind. I've solved some of the best problems, some of the biggest problems out on runs, because I can get what I think is just some clarity about about my thought process and things that are challenging me. That, when the phones are ringing and you're looking at email and you're doing a whole bunch of, you got 5 meetings that day and all the other things you got going on, it's really hard to get clarity because you're going from one thing to the next to the next. And so being a runner, it helps me get out. I'm out in nature. I love being outside. And it gives me the ability to be able to be alone. Nobody's barking at me. Nobody's talking to me, except for myself. And so it gives me a lot of clarity, and it helps me to think and just clear my mind sometimes.
That's nice. It's almost like a meditative way that you can just kind of take a break. I like that actually.
Exactly.
And the advice for like the persevering thing, I think that's perfect for our audience of high school students. And I think all of your advice has just been absolutely phenomenal. And kind of like wrapping up the episode with our final question, which is um, finally, like when someone thinks of John Belcik years from now, what kind of impact do you want to make on the organization and the people that you've served around like 5 to 10 years from now?
You know what? I think it's you could put a lot of numbers to it and things, and our organization has come a long way in the time that I've been there. And it's been a really great team effort to get where we are today. But I think the most important thing is for me. I the way I found ICC, or when I went through the door the first time, what's really important to me is to be able to leave it a better place, and so better financially, but as an organization, having the prominence that it should have and deserves, and the recognition it should have, because it is an important entity that most people don't even know exists. And so the fact that and I guess the other thing is that, uh, to me, it's really important to be able to provide people, our staff, and we have about 750 people at ICC right now working for ICC. And we have not had a layoff or a restructure since 2012. We had there was a financial crisis in 08 and 09, and we felt that impact in 12. And we really haven't had any sort of layoffs or anything like that. When my boss at the time, the CEO, we said to each other after we had to do some, we had to cut some staff and do some really hard things that affect people, and that really upset me. But we had to do that to save the organization. And so when we got through that, we both looked at each other and said, we never want to do that again. And we haven't. And so I'm very proud of that fact. And that's one thing that I really want to leave ICC in a better place, a more secure place for those individuals who are going to carry on. I only get to do this for a certain time, and then somebody else will take it over. And I want to leave that person in a position where they don't, not shaking their head, go, I don't know what that guy was doing, but they think, hey, he did a pretty good job, and now I'm going to take it to the next level based upon the foundation that I built for them, and that my boss built for me when I stepped into the role. And so that's really my goal.
John, thank you so much for joining us today. One of the biggest lessons from this conversation is that great leadership isn't just about titles, it's about character. Your commitment to integrity, mentorship, and serving others demonstrates lasting success comes from consistently doing the right thing, even when it's the harder path.
What stood out most to me is the incredible impact of the International Code Council. Most people never think about the standards that keep our homes, schools, hospitals, and workplaces safe. Yet those systems quietly protect billions of lives every day. It's inspiring to hear how your leadership is helping shape that mission for the future.
John, thank you again so much for joining us and sharing your journey and your insights with us. And for everyone listening, thank you so much for joining us on episode number 29 of Professional Perspectives. We hope that today's conversation reminds you that meaningful leadership is built through integrity, lifelong learning, as well as a commitment to making the world a little safer and a little better every day. Until next time, thanks for listening, and keep on exploring your professional perspectives.